Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for watching, thank you for sponsoring, thank you for being part of this. Today we were talking about styles of planking. In construction there really are two types of planking, and that should be a truism for most of the viewers of this channel. But nevertheless, I've been asked to do it, so talk about it I will. What else can I do if I'm to survive the next hours before I leave for the field? The more typical and more frequently used style of planking is, this is a heavy model. Of course, what is known as Carvel-building. This means that all the planks of the side of the vessel are flush with each other and form a smooth or relatively smooth skin over the frames. Carvel planking is the traditional planking of the Mediterranean world. It has existed since the dawn of history. From the Bronze Age onwards, planking in the Mediterranean has been flush or Carvel. Do we know this? Yes, absolutely we do. We have enough shipwrecks by now. The Luburun shipwreck, which sank around the 1300 BC, that one has very small hull fragments surviving, but it has a section through the keel, it has a section through planking, and they all are flush. Egyptian shipbuilding is flush planking. Classical Greek vessels are flush. So are Roman vessels of the period. That continued into the Middle Ages. At first, of course, this was because the hulls were built planking first. So the tradition continued even when the transition from hull first to frame first construction happened. And we know that this transition was completed certainly by the 11th century AD, as the shipwrecks of Serceliman have demonstrated to us. But by this stage, the transition is complete, but the planking is still flush. This is not what is happening in the north, however. In the so-called Romano-Celtic tradition of bottom-based construction, which we see in the English Channel along the shorelines of ancient Armorica, present-day Bretagne in France, on both sides of the English Channel, yes, we see flush planking. But somewhere in the early Middle Ages, when we begin to see the transition, the so-called Germanic style of shipbuilding that eventually will grow up into the Norse and Viking shipbuilding construction, we see a completely different style. And both styles, incidentally, are still with us, keeping us company and keeping us entertained. Although nowadays it is mostly for smaller boats that you see the alternative that the Norse. Here, on La Serve, the cutter that is building on and off, mostly off lately because of the other models that are weighing her table. But over here you see the other style where the planks are overlapping each other. And this style, of course, is known under at least two names. Clinker, which is a term that I prefer for no other reason than that I just like the sound of the word, and lapstrake does exactly the same. It means exactly the same style of planking. This obviously is a later development of the style. It existed certainly from the 7th century onwards. The famous Sutton Hoo shipwreck, or rather ship burial, is clinker-built, so are all the Norse Viking vessels. Then the Kalmar shipwrecks from the 12th and 13th century, actually 13th and 14th centuries AD, all of them are also clinker-built, even if the vessels are completely different in shape from the Viking vessels. The cogs, the famous bulk carriers of the Baltic area, grain carriers, are also an interesting combination. Their topsides, the sides of the vessel are clinker-built, although with sawn rather than split planks, but the bottoms are flat, Carvel-built. For centuries, this was the dominant tradition. In England, after the end of the Romano-Celtic boat-building tradition, we see only clinker-built vessels all the way into really the 15th century. There have been some suggestions that the Mary Rose was initially built as a clinker vessel and subsequently during the repairs was flushed The current archaeological thought is that she was always intended to be Carvel-planked. And it would make sense because the English shipwrights were already knowledgeable and had been acquainted with the Carvel-planking. This transition for the North happened really in the late 15th, throughout the 15th century. By the beginning of the 16th century, clinker is used for smaller vessels. What are the relative advantages and disadvantages? The clinker hull can be built lighter. The Newport vessel, for example, is a good example of a very large cargo carrier of the mid-15th century, which is clinker-built, originally a bust-built vessel as far as the timbers are telling us. So the problem was not building large ships. We have at least one wreck in England that has triple clinker planking. That is to say, 3 layers of planks. Each of the strakes is consisting of 3 layers of planking. It very likely is the Sovereign. It may have had displacement as high as 1,500 tons at the time. So there was no limit to the size of vessel that you can build with a clinker construction. The problem with clinker construction is that it is less resistant to gunfire, partially. If it is traditional where you are assembling the shell first and supporting it after that with frame timbers inside, the edge of the plank is a weak spot. It can split where all the rivets are driven through. It is harder to repair. It's not impossible to repair it. The wrecks from Skudlev have shown us quite clearly that they can be repaired and were extensively repaired and reused, but it is more labor intensive. For whatever reason, cost may have had something to do also. This is a very labor intensive method of construction in comparison with the Carvel planking. But it does produce lighter structure. So these are the 2 main staples. In more modern periods, clinker-built vessels tended to be the smaller fishing vessels, light boats, coastal vessels, but for large ocean-going vessels, Carvel ruled supreme. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you liked it. If you did, give it a thumbs up, support the channel, and I wish you all the best.